Join me as we dive into a story that will keep you glued to your screen, a case that shook America and that you'll want to explore every single detail of. But before we embark on this intense journey, if you love thrilling stories, unsolved mysteries, and want to continue following other fascinating content from me, don't forget to subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. Now, take a deep breath, because we're about to step into a world of darkness, where a killer sowed extreme terror across America. This is the story of the Whisperer in the Walls, one who turned the American dream into a nightmare. The city of Philadelphia, with its cobblestone streets, historic landmarks, and vibrant pulse, was a city of stories. It had witnessed the birth of a nation, countless struggles for freedom, and an endless tapestry of human experience. But in the autumn of 2008, Philadelphia was about to write a new, terrifying chapter into its history, one etched in blood, fear, and an unbearable silence. It began subtly, like a whisper carried on the wind, dismissed by most as mere coincidence. The first victim was Sarah Jenkins, a 24-year-old art history student at the University of Pennsylvania. Her apartment, a cozy, somewhat cluttered space in a brownstone near Rittenhouse Square, was found undisturbed. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. Sarah simply wasn't there. Her roommate, bewildered, reported her missing after a full day of unanswered calls and texts. Police initially treated it as a runaway case, a young woman seeking a temporary escape from academic pressures. It was a common enough occurrence in a city teeming with transient youth. But Detective Elias Thorne, a veteran of 20 years with the PPD Homicide Unit, felt a prickle of unease. He'd seen enough runaways turn into something far more sinister. Thorne was a man carved from the city's own grit, a receding hairline, a perpetually rumpled suit, and eyes that held the weariness of 1,000 solved and unsolved cases. He was partnered with Detective Lena Hansen, a sharp, ambitious detective a decade his junior, whose meticulous nature complemented Thorne's seasoned intuition. They were a good team, but even their combined experience couldn't prepare them for the insidious terror that was about to unfold. 3 days after Sarah Jenkins' disappearance, her body was discovered. Not in the Schuylkill River, not in a hidden alley, but in the desolate, forgotten shell of an abandoned textile factory in North Philadelphia, a relic from the city's industrial past. The factory, known locally as the Loom, was a vast, decaying labyrinth of brick and broken glass, popular with urban explorers and graffiti artists, but largely shunned by regular citizens. Sarah's body was found in a small, windowless storage room, tucked away behind a stack of rusted machinery. She was carefully posed, almost reverently, her eyes wide open, staring at the dust-laden ceiling. There were no obvious signs of trauma, no stab wounds, no bullet holes, no strangulation marks. The medical examiner, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman whose dry wit often masked a profound empathy for the dead, was stumped. The only thing she could conclude was that Sarah had died of a severe internal hemorrhage, the cause of which was, initially, a mystery. There were no external marks to suggest how it had occurred. The absence of struggle still puzzled them. Sarah was strong-spirited. Why hadn't she fought back? The crime scene itself was unsettling. While there were no signs of a struggle in the immediate vicinity of the body, the room had been meticulously cleaned. No fingerprints, no fibers, no DNA evidence. It was a sterile, almost clinical environment that belied the horror of its contents. The only thing left behind was a faint, almost imperceptible scent of lilies, an unusual detail in such a grimy, forgotten place. Thorne found himself sniffing the air, a phantom floral note clinging to his senses long after he'd left the factory. "Cleanest damn scene I've ever seen," Hansen muttered, her brow furrowed, as they drove back to headquarters. Like the killer was an obsessive-compulsive cleaning lady. Thorne nodded, his gaze fixed on the bustling city streets. Or someone who knows how to leave nothing behind. This wasn't an amateur, Lena. This was professional. The initial press release was carefully worded. Police investigating suspicious death of university student. They didn't use the word murder, yet, hoping to avoid panic, but the media, ever hungry for sensation, smelled blood in the water. Local news channels ran continuous loops of Sarah's smiling student ID photo, juxtaposed with grainy footage of the ominous loom factory. The city began to buzz with a low hum of anxiety. 2 weeks later, the whispers became screams. Dr. Marcus Thorne, a 50-year-old highly respected cardiologist at Pennsylvania Hospital, disappeared from his home in Society Hill. His wife, distraught, called the police after he didn't return from his morning jog. Again, no forced entry, no struggle, just an absence. Elias Thorne felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The name Thorne was just a coincidence, he told himself, but the pattern, however nascent, was chillingly familiar. The search for Dr. Marcus Thorne was far more extensive than for Sarah Jenkins. A man of his stature, his disappearance sparked immediate alarm. Police dogs, helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers scoured the city's parks and riverbanks. Elias and Lena, now burdened with a mounting sense of urgency, found themselves immersed in another investigation that felt disturbingly similar to the first. For days later, Dr. Thorne's body was found. This time, in the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the abandoned Eastern State Penitentiary, a crumbling Gothic fortress of despair, another of Philadelphia's haunting historical sites. He was found in a narrow, solitary confinement cell, deep within the prison's forgotten bowels. Like Sarah, he was meticulously posed, eyes open, staring at the crumbling stone ceiling. The same lack of external trauma, the same internal hemorrhage, the same faint, almost ghostly scent of lilies. "This is it," Thorne said, his voice grim as he stood over the scene, the air thick with the smell of decay and the lingering floral note. "We have a serial killer." Hanson's face was pale. 2 victims, 2 weeks apart. Different demographics, different locations, but the same MO. Why no struggle, Elias? Why no marks? Dr. Reed, having performed the second autopsy, was even more perplexed. The internal bleeding is massive, consistent with blunt force trauma, but there's no external bruising, no broken bones, no scrapes. It's like their insides were violently shaken, but their outsides were left pristine. And the lilies, Elias. I found microscopic traces of lily pollen on both victims' clothes. It's not a common floral scent in abandoned industrial sites. The media frenzy exploded. The Philadelphia Phantom, the city's silent killer, the Lily Slayer headlines screamed across every newspaper and news channel. The mayor held an emergency press conference, assuring the public that all resources were being deployed. A task force was formed, bringing together detectives from multiple precincts, the FBI, and forensic experts. Elias Thorne and Lena Hanson were at its head, their lives now consumed by the relentless pursuit of a ghost. The city, once vibrant and bustling, began to cower. People looked over their shoulders, locked their doors earlier, avoided isolated areas. The sense of security, a fragile veneer in any metropolis, shattered. Parents walked their children to school, holding their hands tighter. Students rarely ventured out alone after dark. The whispers of fear spread faster than any news report. The task force set up shop in a large, windowless conference room at police headquarters, the walls soon covered with corkboards, maps, and crime scene photos. Timelines, victim profiles, potential motives, every theory was debated, every lead pursued, often to a dead end. "Let's review what we know," Thorne began, standing before the assembled team, his voice projecting authority despite his own burgeoning exhaustion. 2 victims. Sarah Jenkins, 24, art student. Dr. Marcus Thorne, 50, cardiologist. No apparent connection. Both abducted without a trace, then found posed in abandoned, historically significant locations. Cause of death: a mysterious internal hemorrhage, no external trauma. Signature: faint lily scent. No forensic evidence whatsoever. A young FBI profiler, Agent Sarah Miller, fresh out of Quantico, spoke up. The lack of struggle and forensic evidence suggests a highly organized killer. They're meticulous, possibly intelligent, and planning these abductions and disposals with extreme care. The posing of the bodies and choice of locations points to a desire for control and possibly a symbolic element we're missing. The different demographics of the victims could mean the killer isn't targeting a specific type, but rather just opportunity, or perhaps the symbolism isn't about who they are, but what they represent. What about the method of death? Hansen interjected. That's the most baffling part. Internal hemorrhage without external marks? Is it possible they're using some kind of ultrasonic weapon? Or a poison that causes such an effect? Dr. Reed, who was present, shook her head. We've run every toxicology screen imaginable. Nothing. And while an ultrasonic weapon is theoretically possible, it would still likely leave some mark, perhaps cellular damage detectable at a microscopic level or thermal burns. We're seeing nothing like that. It's almost as if they simply stopped from the inside out. Her voice was quiet, but the implication was terrifying. Thorne ran a hand over his tired face. The abductions are key. How are they taking these people without a struggle? Sarah Jenkins was fit, and Dr. Thorne was a robust man. No signs of struggle in their homes, no witnesses, no cameras. This killer is either incredibly fast, incredibly strong, or they're using something to incapacitate their victims instantly. The task force delved into the victims' lives, searching for any common thread. Sarah Jenkins was an only child, her parents living in rural Pennsylvania. She was bright, social, with no known enemies. Dr. Thorne was happily married, a respected figure, active in his community, with no discernible skeletons in his closet. They were, on the surface, entirely unconnected. Days bled into nights. The city held its breath. Then the whisper struck again. Emily Carter, a 72-year-old retired librarian, vanished from her small row house in South Philadelphia. She lived alone, fiercely independent, but her daily routine was as predictable as the sunrise. Her neighbor noticed her newspaper hadn't been collected and called the police. Again, the chilling absence. No signs of forced entry, nothing amiss. Just an empty house and an overwhelming sense of dread. Thorne felt a cold, metallic taste in his mouth. 3 victims. 3 distinct ages, genders, backgrounds. The pattern was becoming clearer and more terrifying. It wasn't about who they were, it was about something else. Something universal. He's escalating, Hansen said, her voice strained. The time between abductions is shrinking. This one was barely a week after Dr. Thorne. The search for Emily Carter was frantic. The task force was stretched thin, running on coffee and a rapidly diminishing supply of hope. The entire city felt like a massive, open-air crime scene. Her body was found 5 days later, not in a grand, forgotten landmark this time, but in the cramped, airless basement of an abandoned schoolhouse in Fishtown. She was in a former storage closet behind dusty, broken desks, posed, eyes open, lilies. The exact same horrific tableau. The city plunged into outright panic. Schools considered early closures. Businesses saw a sharp decline in foot traffic. The mayor issued a curfew for minors. The Whisperer, as the media now dubbed the killer due to the quiet, almost ethereal nature of the disappearances, had brought Philadelphia to its knees. The FBI brought in their lead profiler, Agent Malcolm Croft, a man with a reputation for catching the uncatchable. Croft was a lean, intense man with sharp, analytical eyes. He spent hours poring over the case files, visiting the crime scenes, absorbing every detail. This killer isn't just organized. He's highly intelligent, possibly brilliant, Croft stated in his precise, measured tone during the next task force meeting. The choice of victims suggests a progression or a sampling. Different ages, genders, professions. It's like he's testing something or proving something. And the locations. They're all places of transition or confinement, or places that hold a certain kind of forgotten history. A factory, a prison, a school. All empty. Forgotten spaces that once teemed with life, now silent. But why the lilies? Hansen asked, tapping her pen against a notepad. Is it a signature or a clue? Lilies symbolize purity, rebirth, but also death and funerals, Croft mused. In some cultures, They represent a journey of the soul. It could be a taunt, a macabre joke, or it could be deeply personal for the killer. And the method of death. The pristine external appearance, the internal devastation. It's unique. It suggests an intimate, controlled violence that leaves no trace. He wants to be known but not caught. He wants to terrify, but remain unseen. Thorne felt a deep weariness settling in his bones. They were chasing a ghost, a phantom who left behind no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses, only fear and death. What about motive, Agent Croft? What does he want? Croft paused, his gaze sweeping over the grim faces in the room. Control, certainly. The ultimate control over life and death, over an entire city. But beyond that, I believe there's a message, a very personal message that he's trying to convey through these acts. The choice of victims, the locations, the lilies, the method of death, they're all pieces of a puzzle. We just haven't figured out what picture they form yet. The investigation turned inward, away from traditional leads. They started reviewing every missing person report from the last 5 years, looking for similar MOs. They interviewed countless florists in the city, asking about large lily purchases, a fruitless endeavor given the commonality of the flower. They set up hotlines, plastered reward posters, and urged the public to report anything, no matter how insignificant. The tips poured in, a deluge of paranoia and misinformation, each one needing to be painstakingly investigated. Meanwhile, Thorne and Hansen, along with other dedicated detectives, revisited the crime scenes, walking through the abandoned buildings, trying to imagine the killer's movements, to feel the chilling silence he left behind. The loom, with its broken windows and rusted machinery, felt heavy with Sarah's absence. Eastern State Penitentiary, its cell block still echoing with the ghosts of past prisoners, was even more suffocating with Dr. Thorne's presence. The abandoned school, with its chipped paint and tiny, empty desks, felt like a silent scream for Emily. One evening, Thorne was alone at headquarters, staring at the cork board, the faces of the victims staring back at him. Sarah, Marcus, Emily. So different, yet brought together by this unseen force. He picked up a magnifying glass and examined the close-up photos of the victims' faces. Their eyes, all open, all staring, not at him, not at the ceiling, but through it, as if witnessing something beyond mortal comprehension. "What did you see?" he whispered to the photos, the silence of the bullpen amplifying his voice. "What did he do to you?" The answer eluded him. The city held its breath, waiting for the next whisper, the next horrifying absence. The whisperer had woven a shroud of terror around Philadelphia, and no one knew when or where he would strike again. The echoes had just begun, and they were growing louder, promising a crescendo of unparalleled dread. The hunt for the ghost had begun, and every passing moment brought them closer to either catching him or becoming his next victim. The story of the whisperer in the walls was far from over, and its darkest chapters were yet to be written. The relentless pressure on the Philadelphia Police Department was a tangible thing, a suffocating blanket that settled over every officer, every detective, every civilian staff member. Following Emily Carter's murder, the city had transformed. Public spaces, once bustling, were now sparse. The Liberty Bell, usually surrounded by throngs of tourists, saw a dramatic drop in visitors. The Phillies games, a city staple, were attended by a nervous, subdued crowd. The whisperer wasn't just killing people. He was killing the spirit of Philadelphia. Detective Thorne, now living on a diet of stale coffee and microwave burritos, felt the weight of it all. His wife, Clara, had stopped asking when he'd be home, settling instead for daily check-in texts that often went unanswered for hours. Lena Hansen, usually meticulous in her appearance, now sported perpetually messy hair and the same worn jacket for days on end. The dark circles under their eyes were badges of honor in this war against an invisible enemy. Agent Croft had established a clear profile, a highly intelligent, narcissistic, likely psychopathic male, aged late 20s to early 40s. He derived satisfaction from the chaos and fear he created, seeing himself as an artist, each victim a brushstroke in his grand, horrifying masterpiece. The lack of forensic evidence and the precision of the abductions pointed to a background in either special forces, covert operations, or perhaps a highly specialized, technical field that demanded extreme attention to detail and discretion. His psychological makeup suggested a profound sense of superiority, possibly stemming from childhood trauma or a deep-seated grievance. "He's not just killing them, Elias," Croft had explained one harrowing night, tracing a finger over a map dotted with victim locations. "He's making a statement. Each location, each victim, the lilies, they're all part of a narrative he's crafting. We need to understand his narrative." The task force was flooded with tip psychics, conspiracy theorists, disgruntled neighbors, all claiming to know the killer. Each lead, no matter how outlandish, had to be checked. Every person with a grudge, every individual with a history of violence, every oddball in the city came under scrutiny. The resources were stretched thin, and the frustration was palpable. The media, while critical, was also a tool. Elias held regular, terse press conferences, appealing for public vigilance, for any information. He used the fear to his advantage, knowing that a terrified populace might yield a crucial detail. But mostly, the media just amplified the panic, creating a feedback loop of anxiety that choked the city. Then came the fourth victim. Michael Vance, a 30-year-old chef known for his innovative bistro in Queen Village, vanished. Unlike the previous victims, Vance was something of a night owl, often working late. He lived in a loft apartment above his restaurant. His sous chef, arriving for the morning prep, found the restaurant locked, the lights off, and Vance's car still parked outside. His apartment, too, was undisturbed. The same phantom abduction. This time, the timeline was even tighter, just 5 days after Emily Carter. The Whisperer was accelerating, becoming bolder, more confident. The city braced itself for the next horrific discovery. Michael Vance's body was found in the crumbling grandeur of the old Philadelphia Mint building, a neoclassical structure long since abandoned and slated for demolition. He was found in the vault, a massive, reinforced chamber deep within the building. Again posed, eyes open, lilies, the now infamous signature. The discovery sent shockwaves of a new intensity through the city. The Mint, a symbol of national wealth and history, felt like a deliberate provocation. The killer was not only claiming lives, but also desecrating symbols of the city's identity. "He's playing with us," Hansen said, her voice laced with venom, as they processed the scene. A factory, a prison, a school, a mint. What's next? Independence Hall. The thought sent a shiver down Thorne's spine. Dr. Reed, after Vance's autopsy, was more agitated than usual. "Elias, I've never seen anything like it. The internal hemorrhage is consistent, but this time I managed to isolate some microscopic particles. They're crystalline, almost like incredibly fine sand, but they don't match any known mineral. They're too uniform, too perfect. And the sheer quantity. They were everywhere in his bloodstream, in his organs. Crystalline particles?" Thorne pondered, his mind racing. Could it be a weapon? Something that fragments upon impact internally? Perhaps, Reed conceded. But again, no external entry point, no trauma. It's as if these particles were introduced internally without breaking the skin. "I'm sending samples to a specialized lab, but this is uncharted territory, Elias. This killer isn't just good. He's innovating murder." Croft, when informed of the new forensic detail, grew quiet, his eyes distant. Crystalline particles. A method that causes internal destruction without external trace. This supports the theory of a highly sophisticated killer. He's not using a knife or a gun. He's using something elegant and terrifying. The task force redoubled its efforts. They put out a more detailed description of the signature. The abandoned locations, the specific type of lily, Oriental lily, a fragrant hybrid, the pristine bodies. They hoped someone, somewhere, would connect a seemingly innocuous detail to the killer. One of the more promising leads came from a former urban explorer, a young man named Alex Finch, who had been interviewed after the initial discoveries. He mentioned a hidden network of tunnels and forgotten spaces beneath the city, known only to a small, clandestine community of explorers. He drew them maps, talked about secret entrances, forgotten service tunnels, and abandoned sub-basements. These were spaces that didn't appear on any official city plan, remnants of centuries of construction and reconstruction. These places, they're like ghost towns beneath the city, Finch explained, nervously tracing lines on a crude map. You can get in and out of some of them without anyone ever knowing. They're dark, labyrinthine, perfect for someone who doesn't want to be seen. Thorne and Hansen, along with a team of tactical officers, began exploring these subterranean networks. It was a descent into an almost surreal world, dust-choked air, dripping water, rats scattering in the flashlight beams. They found graffiti, crude campsites, but no sign of the Whisperer, no lair, no obvious pathway. Yet, the possibility that the killer was using this hidden world to transport victims or evade capture was a chilling one. It explained the lack of witnesses, the ghost-like abductions. He was moving through the very foundations of the city unseen. The strain began to show on Elias Thorne. He started having nightmares of Sarah's staring eyes, of Dr. Thorne's placid face, of Emily's delicate hands, of Michael's chef's uniform, all covered in lilies. His family life was suffering. Clara and their 2 teenage children felt his absence acutely. He snapped at Hansen, he barked at junior officers. He was a man consumed, driven by an almost desperate need to stop the terror. Lena, too, was struggling. She found herself checking her apartment's locks multiple times before bed, double-checking windows, jumping at every shadow. The sheer audacity and elusive nature of the killer chipped away at her professional resilience. She often called her sister late at night, just to hear a familiar, comforting voice. The task force was an organism under siege. Some detectives were burning out, others grew cynical. The public's trust in the police was eroding. Talk radio shows were rife with accusations of incompetence, theories of government cover-ups, and dire predictions. Then the killer made a mistake. Or perhaps it was a deliberate taunt. A package arrived at the Philadelphia Inquirer, addressed to the editor-in-chief. It was a plain, unmarked brown envelope. Inside was a single white oriental lily, perfectly preserved, and a short, typewritten note. The whispers grow louder. The note was short, chillingly poetic, and unsigned. It was immediately turned over to the FBI and the task force. Agent Croft analyzed every nuance. "This is a direct communication," Croft declared, his voice tight with excitement and frustration. "He wants us to know he's watching. He's enjoying this. The truth in the silence. What does that mean? Is he referring to the quiet deaths? Or a deeper truth he believes he's revealing?" The paper and the lily were meticulously examined. No fingerprints, no DNA. The paper was generic, widely available. The typewriter, an old manual model, left no digital trace. However, forensics did find a faint indentation on the lily stem, consistent with being held by a specific type of metal clip or clamp. It was a tiny, almost insignificant detail, but it was something. A metal clamp. Hansen mused, staring at the photo of the lily. Could it be part of the mechanism he uses to kill them? Or just to transport the flowers? The note, though providing no immediate leads, electrified the investigation. The killer was no longer just an unseen force. He was actively engaging them, challenging them. This heightened the sense of urgency, but also gave them a sliver of hope. A killer who communicates, no matter how cryptically, often reveals more than they intend. Thorne, however, felt a colder dread. He's testing us. He's playing a game, and he controls the rules. A major breakthrough came from Dr. Reed's specialized lab. The crystalline particles found in Michael Vance's body had been identified. They were microscopic shards of a highly advanced, ultradense composite material, almost like an engineered ceramic, designed for extreme durability and resonant frequencies. It was a material not typically found in commercial use, but rather in niche, high-tech applications, aerospace, advanced medical devices, perhaps even military-grade stealth technology. This material, Elias, Dr. Reed explained, her eyes wide with scientific awe and horror, if vibrated at a precise, high frequency, could literally cause cellular disruption. It could induce internal bleeding without breaking the skin. It's like a miniature internal sonic weapon, and it would leave no external trace. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a serial killer. This was a scientific genius, or someone with access to incredibly advanced technology and knowledge. The profile shifted again. The killer was not just organized and intelligent, but technically brilliant. So, he's implanting these particles? Thorne asked, incredulous. And then activating them remotely? That's the most logical explanation, Reed confirmed. A microscopic, virtually undetectable delivery system, followed by an activation that causes the precise internal trauma we're seeing. It's a method so advanced, it borders on science fiction. The task force now had a clearer understanding of how the victims were being killed, but still no idea who was doing it or why. The hunt for anyone with access to such technology became paramount. They cast a wide net, contacting universities, defense contractors, advanced research facilities, looking for anyone who might be developing or experimenting with such materials. The list of suspects grew exponentially, but without a face, without a name, without a motive, it was a haystack in a field of needles. Meanwhile, the city was in a state of suspended animation. Schools were seeing increased truancy rates. Businesses continued to suffer. The sense of community, once so strong in Philadelphia, was fracturing under the strain of pervasive fear. People mistrusted strangers, looked suspiciously at neighbors. The Whisperer had isolated them, made them fearful of each other. One night, Lena was on patrol with a uniformed officer, responding to a routine break-in call in an otherwise quiet residential neighborhood. As they secured the scene, she noticed a faint, almost imperceptible floral scent in the air. Her heart pounded. Lilies. She spun around, scanning the street, her hand instinctively going to her service weapon. The uniformed officer, noticing her sudden alarm, looked at her questioningly. "Do you smell that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The officer sniffed the air. "Smell what, detective?" "Just exhaust fumes and a bit of damp earth." Lena sniffed again. It was gone. Phantom. Or was it? Her mind played tricks on her. The stress, the exhaustion, the constant fear. She shook her head, trying to clear it. Nothing. Just tired. But the experience left her deeply unsettled. Had the Whisperer been nearby? Was he watching them? The thought chilled her to the bone. The hunt continued, relentlessly. Thorne and Hansen pursued every lead, no matter how small. They revisited the victims' lives, searching for any connection to cutting-edge technology, any forgotten patents, any disgruntled scientists. They interviewed families, friends, colleagues, sifting through the minutiae of their lives for a hidden clue. Croft, meanwhile, pored over the killer's note, dissecting every word. The whispers grow louder. The city sleeps. But some of us, we hear the truth in the silence. He kept coming back to it. He's claiming to be enlightened, to possess a truth the rest of us are oblivious to. He sees himself as an agent of revelation, a catalyst for understanding. The killings aren't just random acts of violence. They are sermons. Sermons of what? Thorne asked, exasperated. Silence and death? Perhaps, Croft replied, his eyes distant. Perhaps a critique of modern society, of our complacency, our disconnection. He's chosen victims that represent different facets of a thriving city. An artist, a healer, a scholar, a creator of sustenance. Perhaps he's saying these are all hollow, meaningless pursuits in the grand scheme of his truth. The next move from the Whisperer was not a body, but a piece of evidence. A small, anonymous package arrived at the main library branch downtown. Inside, nestled amongst dried lilies, was a carefully preserved, incredibly old, leather-bound journal. Its pages were brittle, its script faded, but legible. It was a diary, dating back to the late 19th century, penned by a previously unknown architect who had been involved in the design and construction of many of Philadelphia's forgotten underground tunnels and abandoned buildings. The journal spoke of a secret society, a clandestine group that believed the city's growth was stifling a deeper, more profound connection to the earth, to forgotten energies. It described ancient ley lines beneath Philadelphia and how certain architectural structures, especially those that were then abandoned and left to decay, could act as conduits for these silent truths. The architect wrote of a whisper in the walls, an ethereal resonance that could only be heard in the profound silence of forgotten places. He believed this whisper held the key to ultimate knowledge, even ultimate power over life and death. Thorne read the journal, his blood running cold. This was it, the killer's narrative, the symbolism of the locations, the silence, the internal deaths. He was following this madman's blueprint. "He's not just a killer, Elias," Hansen said, her voice barely a whisper, as she finished reading a particularly disturbing passage. "He's a zealot. He believes in this ancient nonsense. He thinks he's literally hearing a whisper that gives him power." Croft nodded, his expression grim. "This journal is his manifesto. The victims are sacrifices, testaments to this truth he's trying to reveal. He's trying to wake the city up to the silent truths buried beneath its foundations, just as he's buried his victims in its forgotten places." The journal, a historical artifact in its own right, now became a vital piece of forensic evidence. Experts meticulously analyzed its paper, ink, and binding. They discovered that it had been handled recently, despite its age. Traces of the same unique crystalline particles found in Vance's body were also found embedded in the journal's leather cover, almost as if it had been near the killing device. The killer was leaving a trail, a convoluted, terrifying one. He wasn't just a ghost. He was a teacher, a twisted prophet, and the city of Philadelphia was his congregation, forced to listen to his symphony of silence, waiting for the final, terrifying crescendo. The net was beginning to tighten, not around the man, but around his twisted ideology, his method, and the very specific, obscure knowledge he possessed. They were closer, but the danger was escalating, for they were now truly entering the mind of a madman. The whispers were no longer just echoes. They were forming sentences, and those sentences spoke of a terrifying end. The discovery of the architect's journal, with its chilling narrative of silent truths and whispers in the walls, had transformed the investigation from a search for a killer to a desperate race against a zealot. The task force, now fully aware of the killer's profound ideological motivation, had a new lens through which to view the mounting horror. The Whisperer wasn't just a murderer. He was a prophet of decay, a high priest of forgotten places, convinced he was unveiling a cosmic secret to a complacent city. Agent Croft's profile refined further. The killer wasn't just intelligent. He was a savant, possibly isolated, deeply immersed in obscure lore, with a profound understanding of acoustics, materials science, and possibly even architectural history. The crystalline particles and the method of death suggested he had either developed the technology himself or had appropriated it from a highly specialized, perhaps experimental, field. His choice of victims, spanning various societal contributions, now seemed to represent a symbolic dismantling of the city's perceived strengths and achievements: art, healing, education, commerce, sustenance. Each life extinguished was a statement, a refutation of human endeavor in the face of his perceived, silent truth. Thorne, fueled by an almost spiritual weariness, had delved into the journal, finding himself oddly drawn into its insane logic. He spent hours cross-referencing the architect's notes with historical city maps, trying to find commonalities, patterns in the locations the architect had worked on or mentioned as conduits. Hansen, meanwhile, worked with Dr. Reed, exploring the implications of the crystalline material and its remote activation. They brought in experts on resonant frequencies and advanced materials, theorizing how a signal could be transmitted through the city's unseen infrastructure, the very walls of the Whisperer's title. The architect, known only as Bartholomew Thorne, a distant and unrelated name that sent a chill through Detective Thorne, detailed in his journal a fascination with the acoustic properties of urban structures, particularly the way certain materials and voids could resonate with natural frequencies, creating inaudible whispers. He believed these whispers were messages from the under-earth, carrying profound knowledge, and that modern construction, with its noise and vibration, had silenced them. He wrote of a need to purify certain sites, to create new conduits of silence, where these truths could once again be heard. He's not just selecting abandoned places, Elias, Hansen explained one late night, pointing to a map where she'd highlighted the Whisperer's crime scenes and the architect's mentioned locations. He's choosing places that Bartholomew Thorne specifically worked on or referenced as having unique, resonant properties. He's following a literal blueprint of madness. This realization was a breakthrough. The task force now had a narrowed list of potential locations for future attacks. They began setting up surveillance on these historical, often abandoned sites, hoping to catch the killer in the act. But the Whisperer was cunning, elusive. He knew the city's hidden passages better than anyone. The city, though terrified, was not entirely broken. Inspired by the resilience of its police force, and perhaps by the sheer defiance of the human spirit, a new kind of vigilance emerged. Neighborhood watch groups became more organized. Community leaders urged people to look out for one another. The media, while still sensationalist, also began to focus on the community's fight back, turning the Whisperer into a symbol of evil to be overcome, rather than an unstoppable force. The killer, however, was not done. His next victim was Dr. Evelyn Reed herself. The medical examiner, a woman who had faced death daily with clinical detachment, was found missing from her home. No forced entry, just an empty space where a formidable presence had been. Thorne felt a personal betrayal, a sickening lurch in his gut. Reed had been more than a colleague. She was a linchpin of their investigation, a fierce intellect. Her disappearance was a direct attack on the very core of their efforts. "He's taunting us, Elias," Hansen said, her voice raw with grief and rage. "He's striking at us directly now. He knows we're close. He's telling us he can touch anyone." The search for Dr. Reed was the most intense yet. Every officer, every agent, felt the sting of this personal attack. They knew her habits, her routines, her favorite coffee shop. They scoured her apartment for any clue, any indication. They found nothing except the faint, almost imperceptible scent of lilies clinging to her lab coat, which she'd left on a chair. He had been in her home. 3 days later, Dr. Reed's body was found. This time, the location was particularly cruel. The oldest, most forgotten section of Laurel Hill Cemetery, a vast, ornate burial ground overlooking the Schuylkill River. She was found in a mausoleum, amidst the silent, marble monuments of the long dead. Posed, eyes open, lilies. The tableau of horror was complete. But this time there was a difference. Tucked into her hand, almost hidden, was a single, meticulously folded piece of paper. It was a page from Bartholomew Thorne's journal, a specific passage highlighted. "The ultimate silence is not merely an absence of sound, but an absence of all vibration, all life. Only then can the true whispers be heard, and the truth revealed." Thorne knelt beside Reed's body, his jaw clenched, tears stinging his eyes. This was more than a murder. It was a perversion, a grotesque commentary on her life's work. She, who had devoted her life to understanding the mechanisms of death, was now a victim, a subject of the killer's macabre philosophy. The journal page was a literal breadcrumb, leading them directly into the killer's mind. The phrase "absence of all vibration, all life" resonated deeply with their understanding of the crystalline particles and the internal hemorrhaging. He wasn't just killing them. He was silencing them in the most profound way possible, making them resonate with his silent truth. Croft, shaken by the personal nature of this attack, had a chilling realization. The specific phrase, "absence of all vibration, all life," it's not just a philosophical statement. It's a technical descriptor. He's literally making them vibrateless. This isn't just about the structure, Elias. This is about what's inside the structure. What is the fundamental building block of all life? Cells. He's inducing cellular collapse. This gave them a new direction. The material itself. Where would someone get access to such a material? Or learn to engineer it? They focused their search on highly specialized research facilities in the greater Philadelphia area, specifically those dealing with advanced nanotechnology, acoustics, or bioengineering. One such facility, a highly secretive private research lab named Resonance Dynamics, located discreetly outside the city in a sprawling, unassuming campus, immediately stood out. It had a history of controversial, cutting-edge research into vibroacoustics and their applications in various fields, some of which bordered on the theoretical. They had recently developed a new, highly advanced composite material, known only by its project code, Silencia, which matched the description of the crystalline particles found in the victims. A former disgruntled employee of Resonance Dynamics, a brilliant but eccentric physicist named Dr. Eris Thorne, no relation to Detective Thorne, had been fired 5 years prior for unethical research practices and unstable behavior. He had championed a radical theory about the resonant frequencies of living organisms and the possibility of inducing cellular apoptosis, programmed cell death, through precise sonic vibrations, potentially without external damage. His research had been deemed too dangerous, too morally ambiguous. He had left the company under a cloud of bitterness and threats of exposing their suppression of truth. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Dr. Eris Thorne fit the profile perfectly. Brilliant, technically advanced, isolated, narcissistic, and harboring a deep-seated grievance. He had the knowledge, the access, or the ability to recreate the technology, and the motive rooted in a twisted ideology that mirrored Bartholomew Thorne's journal. He was Bartholomew's spiritual successor, taking his ancestors' philosophical whispers and turning them into a horrifying, deadly reality. Eris Thorne, Elias whispered, staring at the old personnel file, a mugshot of a gaunt, intense man with piercing, almost manic eyes. He's our whisperer. The task force immediately mobilized. They secured a warrant for Eris Thorne's last known address, a secluded farmhouse on the outskirts of Chester County. Every available unit converged on the location. The farmhouse was old, dilapidated, almost swallowed by overgrown foliage. Seemed quiet, deceptively peaceful. As the tactical team breached the door, they found the interior was a chilling testament to Eris Thorne's madness. The walls were covered with handwritten notes, equations, and diagrams of resonant frequencies, alongside passages from Bartholomew Thorne's journal. Maps of Philadelphia were heavily annotated, marked with the victim locations and other conduits of silence. Lilies, both fresh and dried, were everywhere, their sweet, cloying scent hanging heavy in the air. In the basement, they found his lab. It was a sophisticated, makeshift facility, filled with custom-built equipment. Central to it was a device, a sleek metallic chamber with an array of emitters connected to a complex control panel. Beside it, they found the delivery system, a modified, high-precision air gun designed to inject microscopic particles into a subject, almost imperceptibly. He had perfected the silent abduction and the silent kill. Eris Thorne was not there, but in the center of his lab, suspended in a large, transparent, soundproof chamber, was a final, horrifying display. A human figure, meticulously posed. Not a victim, but a mannequin. It was dressed in Elias Thorne's typical rumpled suit. Its eyes, wide and staring, were painted with an eerie realism. Around its head, a crown of lilies, and on the wall behind it, scrawled in blood-red paint, a final, chilling message. The silence will consume all. You, Elias, will finally hear it. It was a trap, a final, personal taunt. Eris Thorne was targeting Elias. A rapid search of the farmhouse yielded a crucial clue. A single, overlooked detail in one of Eris's planning maps. A red circle around a lesser-known historical site. The crypt of Christ Church, one of Philadelphia's oldest, most sacred, and most silent places. It was the ultimate conduit of silence. A place where the dead lay undisturbed for centuries. He's there, Elias stated, his voice devoid of emotion, but his eyes burning with a fierce determination. He's waiting for me. The tactical team, led by Hansen, wanted to go in first, but Elias shook his head. He wants me. This is my fight. He wants me to hear his truth. I'll go in alone. It was a reckless, dangerous decision, born of desperation and a profound sense of responsibility for the lives lost, and for Dr. Reed. Reluctantly, Hansen agreed to secure the perimeter and be ready to move at his signal. Elias Thorne entered the ancient crypt of Christ Church. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of aged stone and damp earth. Coffins, some centuries old, lined the walls in solemn rows. It was the epitome of silence. And there, in the center of the main chamber, was Eris Thorne. He was a slender figure, dressed in simple, dark clothes, his face illuminated by a single, powerful lantern. He held a small, almost elegant device in his hand, a remote activator. Beside him, on a makeshift table, lay a similar air gun loaded. And on a nearby slab of marble, a fresh bouquet of oriental lilies. "Detective Thorne?" Eris said, his voice surprisingly calm, almost serene, echoing in the confined space. "You've finally arrived. Welcome to the symphony of true silence." "It's over, Eris," Elias replied, his hand hovering over his holstered weapon. "You're done." Eris chuckled, a dry, unsettling sound. "Done? No, detective. I'm just beginning." You see, Bartholomew understood. The city, it hums with lies, with superficial noise. I merely amplify the truth that lies beneath, the truth of ultimate stillness. You've been chasing me, detective, but you haven't been listening. My victims, they are the proof. Their final moments were not fear, but profound understanding. They heard the whispers. He gestured to the airgun. "This device, Silencia, it introduces the resonant particles. This remote," he held up the small device, "it activates them. A frequency so precise, so quiet, it disintegrates the very bonds of life from within. No struggle, no pain, only clarity, only silence." Elias saw the madness in Eris's eyes, but also a chilling conviction. "You killed innocent people, Eris. You terrorized a city." "Innocent?" Eris scoffed. "They were deaf, detective, blind, to the beauty of what lies beyond the clamor. I merely opened their eyes, and now I will open yours." With a sudden, swift movement, Eris aimed the air gun at Elias. Before Elias could react, he felt a pinprick sensation on his arm, barely noticeable. Eris then dropped the air gun and raised the remote. "The particles are within you now, detective," Eris said, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "Soon you will feel the resonance. You will understand. You will hear the whispers that only the truly silent can perceive." Elias felt a cold dread, but also a surge of adrenaline. He knew what he had to do. He drew his weapon, but Eris simply smiled, activating the remote. "It will be exquisite, detective," Eris whispered, his finger on the button. "The symphony begins." Just as Eris's thumb pressed down, Elias, with a desperate, lunging movement, fired. The shot echoed deafeningly in the crypt. Eris Thorne crumpled to the ground, the remote clattering from his grasp. His eyes, wide and still full of a mad conviction, stared at the ceiling as life left him. Elias stood over him, breathing heavily, his arm throbbing. The particles. He could feel them, or perhaps it was just his mind playing tricks, a phantom sensation. He looked at the fallen remote, then back at Eris's unseeing eyes. He had stopped the whisperer, but had he also become a victim? Hansen and the tactical team burst into the crypt, weapons raised, finding Elias standing over the body of Eris Thorne. Relief washed over their faces, quickly replaced by concern for Elias. "Elias, are you hurt?" Hansen rushed to his side. He looked at his arm, the tiny, almost invisible mark. He got me with the gun. Before I shot him." Hansen's face went pale. Dr. Reed's ultimate sacrifice had led them here, and now Thorne, too, might be destined for the same silent end. The tactical team quickly secured Eris Thorne's body and began to carefully dismantle his lab. Dr. Reed's team, heartbroken but resolute, immediately began to work on a counteragent, or at least a way to neutralize the particles within Elias. The city of Philadelphia erupted in a collective sigh of relief and celebration. The whisperer was dead. The terror was over. Slowly, painstakingly, the city began to heal, to reclaim its vibrant pulse. The fear receded, replaced by a renewed sense of community and gratitude for the tireless efforts of the police. Elias Thorne underwent extensive medical examinations. The crystalline particles were indeed found in his bloodstream, but for reasons medical science couldn't fully explain, they remained inert. Perhaps Eris Thorne, in his dying moments, hadn't fully activated the device, or the shock of the gunshot had disrupted the activation sequence. Or perhaps Elias's own will, his fierce defiance, had somehow resisted the ultimate silence. He would live, but the experience, the encounter with such profound madness, would forever mark him. Months later, the story of the Whisperer in the Walls became a chilling legend, a dark chapter in Philadelphia's rich history. Eris Thorne was posthumously exposed as the serial killer, his twisted ideology and scientific genius brought to light. The Journal of Bartholomew Thorne was archived, a disturbing relic of a shared madness across centuries. Detective Elias Thorne, now a local hero, continued his work, but with a new, quiet intensity. He still occasionally felt a phantom ache in his arm, a whisper of the particles that had once resided within him. He sometimes wondered if, in the profound silence of the crypt, he had heard something, a fleeting glimpse of Eris Thorne's terrible truth. But mostly, he chose to hear the vibrant, beautiful noise of the living city, the laughter, the chatter, the music, the constant, beautiful symphony of life that Eris Thorne had sought to silence. Lena Hansen, now promoted, stood by his side, her own experiences making her a more empathetic, yet equally fierce, defender of the city. They had faced the darkness, looked into the abyss of human cruelty, and emerged, scarred but unbroken. The whispers in the walls had been silenced, replaced by the enduring echoes of justice and the resilient heartbeat of a city that refused to be afraid. The truth, in the end, was not found in silence, but in the unwavering human voice that cried out for justice and refused to be silenced.